afternoon, good evening, wherever you may find yourself on this big, beautiful blue marble that we call planet Earth. This is Ultra Life Today. I'm Josh Bellew. I'm here with Adam Payne, the CEO and founder of Ultra Botanica, my dear friend. And before we introduce our guest, Adam, how are you?
I am brilliant today. Just buzzing around.
Good.
Lots of energy.
You know, so one of the things I love about our guest today is I consider him kind of an iconoclast, a rebel, somebody that was adopting early into this idea of integrative and functional nutrition and medicine for people's lives. His background is one of being a pharmacist. He was one of the first pharmacists, I think, in the entire state of Oklahoma that began to really depart into the idea of what's causing people to be sick. Can we look at an underlying cause? Can we actually do something that is going to address the underlying cause and actually bring vibrant health or restored health to an individual? And so sitting to my immediate left is my dear friend, Keith Bishop. Keith, welcome to Ultra Life Today.
Thank you.
We're so glad to have you. And, you know, Adam and I are huge on hearing about individuals' origin stories. Every time we interview an integrative health practitioner or functional medicine clinical nutritionist, we have these fascinating stories of what caused them to kind of depart from what would be that conventional paradigm and move into what has now become for you, a lifestyle and a thriving practice. So help us out and give us some insight into what caused you to, go from pharmacy into what you're doing today.
Right. Well, I had a pharmacy in Mustang and for 15 years. And while I was in the pharmacy, I started going to education programs, certification programs for asthma and bronchial pulmonary management. My wife had asthma, and she also had migraine headaches, but the asthma was at times pretty severe. And even one night, she had a severe asthma attack, and almost had to take her to the hospital. And then I was like, okay, what would they do? If we had to go to the hospital, what would they have done? And so I was reading the protocols, and one of the things they'd given would be magnesium. Okay.
At the hospital setting.
At the hospital
magnesium.
setting.
Nice.
Magnesium injection.
Okay.
And so, I have magnesium. And so I'd actually been going
So hold on. So if somebody went in with what you're saying is if somebody goes into the hospital with an acute asthma episode, they would give them magnesium infusions?
Yes. And so an injection of magnesium, because the lungs are a muscle.
Okay.
And when they relax, they open up.
Makes sense.
Hold on.
Makes sense.
Oh, I thought the lungs were tissue and the muscle was the diaphragm.
Well, that's part of it.
Okay.
The diaphragm.
I love it when Adam gets schooled by one of our guests.
So there are muscles in the lung tissue?
Yes. The lungs are tissues. I mean, it's not just the diaphragm pulling it down, but
sure.
They can expand out.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like, blood vessels are more like a muscle.
Interesting, because they have contractile.
They have contractile, and is the heart really strong enough to pump blood all the way through the whole body? And so we're learning that the blood vessels, contract and relax, calcium, magnesium, the intestines, the esophagus, the stomach.
So calcium contracting, magnesium relaxing,
right.
Calcium.
The bladder.
Intriguing.
Hold on here. You're adding a whole new paradigm to my thinking here. Mm-hmm. And this is just common knowledge in the medical space?
Probably not. I mean, they probably have some knowledge of that, but as far as like nutrition aspects or what does a muscle require, they're not trained for that. And so you have to go through the medical journals, and they do the experiments on the little animals, and
so this is something that's kind of learned and been kind of has become obvious. So Keith, I want you to scroll back the Wayback Machine. Remember that with what was that? Who did the Wayback?
Mr. Peabody.
Mr. Peabody,
Okay.
Right? So, why did you get into medicine? Sherman, that's right.
Yeah.
Who wants to be? Are you Peabody or am I Sherman? I don't know. We'll figure that out as we go forward today.
I think you're Mr. Peabody.
I'm Mr. Peabody.
I'm the guy that translates. You're the guy that thinks of really good
going
ideas.
back in time.
You're older than me, so
I don't know about that. So Keith, so we're taking the Wayback Machine here.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What happened?
Well, actually, I first started off in music education, so I was a musician. and I still play trumpet. And, but thanks to actually a band director's wife, she found out I was wanting to become a teacher, and she said, it's sad, but she said, don't do it. Why? It burst my bubble, and okay. And well, why is that? She says, well, because you have to work hard. And put in many hours as a band teacher.
Wow.
And
that you will never be compensated for.
Exactly. You don't get paid for it, and it's hard on the family.
Oh.
And
so she was giving you kind of this wisdom of life kind of thing.
Right, exactly. And that was, and she heard that I was planning on going into music education, and kind of burst my bubble. I just thought, I had to regroup. And so I went back to my ACT and SAT exams and go, well, life sciences. I did very well, even though I didn't take. I had a science class. I did well in math, calculus, and things like that. But I didn't realize that I had that ability, but I was able to absorb it pretty easy.
Nice.
And so I started thinking, well, I could become a dentist, a doctor, or a pharmacist, kind of a thing, life sciences. And then I have an uncle who is a pharmacist. And so he's 10 years older than me. He's still practicing in Norman, and Uncle Tommy. And so I spent a couple of days with him, shadowing him, and I loved what he did. He was helping people.
Oh, wow.
He was talking to people at a little tiny one-man shop. It's like 1,000 square feet, and so it's small. But he was talking to every single patient, telling them how to take medicines. He did that for me when I was in high school too. I was taking some things for acne, and I was doing it wrong. But doctor or pharmacist never said anything about it.
They just said, here's the prescription.
And so he said, what are you taking? I told him. He said, well, this needs to be done this way. And I wasted years and money, because the food was binding to the antibiotics and not being absorbed. Nobody ever said anything. But so he was helping people, and I thought, that's really neat. So I'm going to switch gears. And so I started off, I transferred to OU and still was in the marching band for a couple of years. I did the pre-pharmacy type thing and marching band and partied. But I did very well, and so I was accepted into pharmacy school before the PCAT test, before we got the results of my tests. And so I did very well with the interviews and grades and things like that. So yes, I did have an aptitude for health sciences. And then went to pharmacy school, and I worked for him part-time. I worked at Norman Hospital, and then got out of the hospital and worked at, I worked at the hospital for a while. I did a retail for a while because I wanted to just double check, make sure that I didn't want to go into those areas. And that wasn't really where I wanted to be, because I wanted to help people. And then I had an opportunity
You didn't want to just be a pill counter, checking insurance, getting the script, doing the mechanics of it.
So I had an opportunity to buy into a pharmacy. I had a couple of partners and bought a pharmacy in Mustang, Oklahoma. And so I had that pharmacy for 15 years. But, and I became actually probably the first, I was a recipient of the first Innovative Pharmacist Award in Oklahoma. And because of my counseling, actually I had counseling booths that I built out into the retail floor. So I actually worked out front, and I had technicians back in the back taking care of everything. And I didn't do the counting. I didn't do the pouring. They did the entry, and then I just checked everything and talked to the patients. And
so you actually did get to be a teacher.
Well, indirectly, yes.
So instead of being behind the counter, like doing the work, you were out on the floor talking to people, saying, hey, what brought you in today? What's going on? Right,
yeah, and had a little basket. My associates would bring out the basket with their prescriptions and the original prescription, and I'd just double check everything, and yep, it's fine, and we'd give it to the patient, and the patient then to take the basket to the cashier. And the cashier would pay, would take the money and do the money thing. And,
what an innovative idea! I guess that's why you got the Innovative Pharmacy Award.
Yes, and so.
Well, Keith, this is an observation, but I think it's really important for our listeners to know this. How much time does a doctor get trained on drugs when they're going through all all of that 6 years or more of medical school? And then how much time does a pharmacist actually learn about teaching someone exactly what's going on with a drug? Because this will shock people. I know this answer.
Yeah, so the doctors, I have to admit, I don't know how many hours they have, but it is limited.
Super small.
Very limited, and even the nutrition aspect is
this is horrifying.
Super small. I mean, it's microscopic.
Nothing for pharmacists and doctors.
I heard that like a doctor gets like maybe 1 to 3 hours of nutrition counseling.
Yeah, same thing with the pharmacy. I mean, it's just
really?
I mean, literally 3 hours, not 3 hours a semester. I mean, it's like a 3-hour class. It's just like
it literally is like, they show up and then they go to lunch and it's done.
Right. We don't even, maybe that's the nutrition counseling is like lunch. Here's your lunch. Yes, there's carbohydrates and proteins and fats, and you should provide a balanced diet for your patients. There you go.
So how much time does a pharmacist spend learning how to administer medication and educate people on that, Keith?
Very little. We did have one class that was it was a retail class, but basically, they didn't tell us anything. It's more like, you got to make your label perfect. You can't have your fingerprints on things, and it has to be cosmetically, good. So really, almost nothing. It was more like, on the job.
Okay, so self-education has been a huge part of your life, even before you moved into integrative type things.
So who teaches? Wow. I mean, your Uncle Tom here.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that just on his own.
So he learned how here's a medication and here's how you're supposed to use it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. How to take it, but he wants to help. So he, instead of filling 300 or 400 prescriptions a day, like some chain pharmacies, so he's doing, 100, maybe a little bit more than that now with technology helping out. But, he just sees a certain number of people, so he can help them.
Obviously building super strong relationships with
every
people
single person. Every single person he walks in, he knows them, he talks to them, and it's just really a neat, experience.
High level.
So wow. So the Wayback Machine has brought you to a point in your journey where you got this innovative pharmacy award. Mm-hmm. And so what happened after that?
Well, and then so I was going to CE programs, continuing education programs for pharmacists about natural products, and
that would have been like 1995.
Oh, let's see. Let me think. Probably so, around 1994, 95.
Great. And
I was, and actually there were a lot of pharmacists that were going, and I mean, I had vitamins and minerals, there. And as a matter of fact, the first story I had was actually a person that had arthritis in either his elbow or shoulder. And so he said, what should I take? And I just said, well, here's some glucosamine sulfate. In Germany, they're having some good results with this.
Wow, that was, and you were on the front edge of that.
And so he took it, and then a couple of months later, he came back and said,
it's working.
Look at this, and I said, and I have to admit, well, what did I do? I didn't remember that, and he said, what's that glucosamine? And I said, oh yeah, that's right. And I go, okay. So I went back and read that medical journal, and so I kind of reviewed that again, and there were, some, once again, just a lot more training aspects, in the natural area. And then my wife with her asthma issues. So now we come into 1994, 95, and my wife had that asthma attack. I read about about magnesium relaxing the lungs. And so I started giving her magnesium. Almost no more asthma. No more migraine headaches.
Wow. Okay. People, are you listening to this? And I'm sure Keith is going to tell us some really unique forms of magnesium because they've gotten so much better about it in the last few years that don't have some of the normal problems associated with taking the old school magnesium. But Keith, you're bringing something up that is this common thread that Adam and I hear over and over with health practitioners, and that is someone near and dear to them.
Yes,
could be a wife, could be a husband, could be a mother, father, or grandpa, grandma, or themselves. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, they don't have answers from their educational background, and so they start looking. That's fascinating.
The information is out there.
Yeah.
And research is being done, but it's not a in school learned type thing.
So was your wife's experience, and I want you to finish that, was that kind of another epiphany for you?
Oh yes. And so it's just like, no more, almost no more asthma problems and migraine headaches. And also I did give her another herb and some feverfew for migraine headaches.
Yeah.
And which is an herb, but also that's where we have to be kind of careful. And so actually that feverfew is almost more like a drug.
It is.
Because when you stop it, you get a rebound headache.
Oh, wow.
And
it's a targeted therapeutic.
It is. Yeah. And so it is actually,
view it that way.
It is more like a drug. And when you don't take it, you will get a rebound headache. It works great, but you've got to continue taking it. And so we actually she took that for several years. And then, I just started to become very dissatisfied with traditional pharmacy. And so now we're approaching 12,
It doesn't
13.
give you that much of a creative palette to work from, does it?
Not really. I mean, I was enjoying. Well, no, it's
kind of like the doctor
pills.
gives you the product. They give the prescription, and it's kind of like, well, that's what I have to work with. It doesn't give you any other really stuff to work with beyond, I guess, what the palette that you limited had from the natural product space.
Right, exactly. And so, and just everything about our body is what we eat, what we absorb, and then how we can get rid of toxins. So, and it's very important. And then reading also that, the statistic is, most people in the United States and actually worldwide get less than half of the recommended daily allowance of magnesium a day anyway.
That's interesting.
And unless you supplement. And then there's the issue about the quality, of the magnesium.
Most of it doesn't absorb, does it? Because it doesn't dissolve from its matrix and doesn't pass through the gut.
Yes. And so the issue is, and which is also one of my favorite areas, is actually absorption from the stomach. So when the minerals, any mineral, there's two words. And so it's like magnesium and oxide or magnesium and citrate. You see those two words on the supplement bottle, those are bound together.
Right, it's the citrate molecule or magnesium sulfate or magnesium glycinate or taurinate.
Everything. It's all stuck together so that it will exist in a liquid or a dry capsule for a tablet.
Right.
And then it goes in here, and hydrochloric acid made by the stomach has to dissolve that bond in chemistry.
And a lot of people are lacking HCl, aren't they? Hydrochloric acid. You just got a rotating, revolving door problems, right?
I didn't know that back then, but yes. Yeah. And so I knew that some were better absorbed than others, and actually citrate at that time was one of the better absorbed.
Yep.
But you have to be careful. Magnesium citrate, also that little green bottle, that's to help evacuate for a bowel prep, and because it acts as a laxative because it's not absorbed.
Wow.
If you get too
so
much,
it creates a hydrostatic gradient, right?
Osmotic gradient. Gradient. And so the magnesium's in the intestines, and the body's going to pull water to dilute that,
which makes it even further not absorbed.
Exactly, and then evacuate that out. So we started. The magnesium definitely saw an improvement. I became dissatisfied, and I just. At first I thought I was going to open up a clinic for respiratory disease management because I was having success. I had a little child, 10 years old, and he was a ice skater.
What year is this, Keith? Just let's put it in perspective.
1995, probably 97, probably 1997 here.
So Keith, let me interrupt you a second. We're going to go take a break. You're listening to Ultra Life today. I'm Josh Bellew. I've got Adam Payne on my far left, and we're having a fascinating origin story and interview with Keith Bishop, Flourish Pharmacy here in Oklahoma City. That does all kinds of cool things.
What letters do you got behind your name right now?
Well, actually, I'm not a registered pharmacist anymore.
He's retired.
And so
to do greater things.
Yeah, exactly.
Help more people.
It frees me up to do more things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. We'll be right back.
Our mission is to take nature's most beloved botanicals and enhance them with our liquid protein scaffold technology. This helps it reach your cells faster and better. With exponentially enhanced bioavailability, you'll feel better every day. Ultra Botanica, the feel-good curcumin.
Hey, welcome back to Ultra Life Today. I'm Josh Bell. You've got Adam Payne, the CEO and founder of Ultra Botanica, on my far left. And we're having a fascinating talk with Keith Bishop, a retired pharmacist who retired from pharmacy because he began to find it opened opportunities for him to help people with an integrative approach to nutrition and supplementation. And Keith, you were in the middle of telling us this amazing story about your wife's asthma and her migraines, and how through a simple supplement,
Right.
and a couple of them actually,
Right, a couple
that
things.
you had discovered something that completely revolutionized her life. And obviously it kind of set you on this interesting course.
Yeah. So I was thinking about opening up a asthma, pulmonary disease management for pharmacists. I was certified in 2 different education programs. And so I just, we got to sell this pharmacy. And so my partner and I, we couldn't find anybody. And at that time, nobody wanted to buy a pharmacy. And because
That was right after the crisis, right? The oil crisis of 94, 95.
Yes. And 2 chain drugstores right across the street. And even though we were successful, but I mean, who wants to go against that? And,
Right.
So I just kind of, didn't do anything, about that, but still, deep in my heart, I just like, this, I just can't keep doing this. I can't.
And this was a God thing, right?
Yes,
you were being
exactly.
prompted.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, discontent and, yes, I'd won some awards. I was teaching people and how to do these things, but that wasn't my calling. And so I prayed to God and said, okay, if you want me to go into natural products and open up a private practice doing natural things, I need your help to sell this pharmacy.
I love fleeces. Putting a fleece before the Lord. Yeah. I think he just smiles sometimes and goes, sure, why not?
Yeah. And then literally, we didn't do any marketing. And then within 2 months, a pharmacist came in and said, Keith, you want to sell your pharmacy? Well, yeah. And so within 1 or 2 months, by December, beginning of December, we'd closed the pharmacy. And pharmacists actually took that, our records and inventory and moved it to another location and just not far away, but just, a block away. And so actually we had our second grandchild or granddaughter at that time. So I kind of enjoyed that a little bit of time off then, and then went and played. One of my hobbies is snow skiing. And so went to, several places and played. And then it's like, okay, early spring, February, it's time to get started. And I had rented a place in North Oklahoma City, Hefner and May, and started remodeling a place, and it was called Health Nut RX. And
you heard about this, Josh, when
I did. And by the way, for all you cowboys out there, you're going to love Keith even more to find out that this guy next to me, he goes out to Colorado and does these extreme rides on horses.
Right.
So what's not to like about this guy here right in the heart of Oklahoma?
Yeah, I love that. I have 2 newer horses, and matter of fact, just rode one Sunday afternoon that, I don't think she'd been ridden in about 5 years. So I didn't look as cool. I didn't have my cowboy hat on.
I was going to ask you if you had a cowboy hat.
Do me a favor, Keith. Whenever you're out in Colorado, do not do any selfies, because you've told me some of the trails you ride on out there. Don't post anything while you're doing that.
Normally it's, you're trying to be careful and type of thing, but it's neat when you're riding a trail and the eagles are below you flying.
That's so
my gosh.
cool.
Yeah, it's just really neat. So
that is cool.
That.
So Adam, I was aware. As a matter of fact, I began to have people tell me, and this is what's so cool about Keith's story. There's a couple of 3 pioneers in Oklahoma, Dr. Howard Haglund. You probably remember him. He was one of these pioneers where this was a desert wasteland for integrative and functional medicine practitioners forever. And Keith was actually one of the people riding that first wave. He opened up this real cool place called Health Nut RX. And I was involved with Blue stuff at the time, and I immediately began to hear people say, yeah, you can go up there and this guy will like consult with you and talk with you and actually help you kind of make a plan for how to supplement. So tell us about that, Keith.
So as we were remodeling, people started coming in. I started, before I officially even opened, I was having appointments and selling, supplements. And so it was great. I really enjoyed that.
This was the era of Metagenics.
Yes.
And what was the other company that was?
Metagenics and Zymogen.
Zymogen were just getting their feet.
Yes, Zymogen hadn't even quite started at that time. Actually, they were called by a different name at that time, and they kind of reorganized and called themselves Zymogen. And so I start off, Metagenics sponsored a certification in clinical nutrition.
Oh, interesting.
And so I went to that program and
this was the whole Metagenics whole thing was these exotic sugars, right? That they had, or was I misunderstanding?
That was a different company.
Yeah, that's a different
company. Okay,
it's a different company.
And for those that don't know, Keith is referring to Zymogen and Metagenics. These are basically clinical grade supplements that are recommended by doctors, pharmacists, DOs, MDs, MDs, and even chiropractors at times that are they're only in that space. That's where you get those.
And so I was selling, primarily Metagenics. I had a few other items that I would carry.
That's right.
And then Zymogen started growing and introduced to them, started carrying their products also. And then they asked me to be on their medical advisory board. I was on their advisory board for 5 years, we'd meet twice a year to set up formulas. And we'd sit around a table and just hammer it out.
So what was that like, being on the advisory board? Did you get to see new ingredients?
Oh, yes. Yeah. New ingredients and new ideas. I mean, Oklahoma wasteland, and nobody else doing what I was doing at that time. And then meeting these other doctors, that were doing this. It was fantastic.
Oh gosh.
And just, so much learning. And so we'd meet, typically, several days before, kind of like the weekend national conference type of thing. And so it was almost a week long type process. And it was great and learning new things. And I just thrived, doing that.
So you were learning things about oxidative stress. You were learning things about inflammation, about cellular pathways, about how to mitigate different issues that were going on systemically. When did this paradigm of, because I want to go back to a theme that we started with here earlier, which is this magnesium calcium balance here. When did that kind of start taking shape in your thinking in a more functional sense?
Well, of course, with the asthma, and so we were recommending it, and the supplement companies were helping to educate us, and meaning practitioners, doing the natural things about the quality. So magnesium glycinate is very well absorbed.
Right.
Citrate is not well absorbed. Matter of fact, that's what we use as a laxative. And then magnesium oxide, which is the cheapest, that's what you'll get at the chain stores. It doesn't dissolve. It's like a rock. Same thing with calcium, has similar type thing. So calcium carbonate is limestone, oyster shell, sand, pearly white. I mean, the pretty white beaches is oyster shell.
That's what I want for breakfast.
Yeah. And evolving and why isn't it being absorbed? And what takes hydrochloric acid. And so, yes, we had hydrochloric acid capsules and trying to help people absorb things. And so we started actually challenging people and say, okay, well, if one capsule doesn't hurt. Actually, there's a book out there, and it's by Dr. Jonathan Wright, Why Stomach Acid is Good for You. And so I had that book. And so he would you take a hydrochloric acid capsule. If it doesn't hurt, the next meal, you'll take 2 capsules. If that doesn't hurt, you take 3. If that doesn't hurt, you take 4.
You find
because
it's
difficult to test acid. You have to swallow a monitor on a wire and go it down into the stomach. And the results are, in quote, patient does not have too much acid. They couldn't even say
how helpful. That's not really a differential, is it?
And it isn't. And so actually, but the issue with this was that my client was, having gastroparesis, which means that actually the stomach is not emptying. So she's eating and food just sitting here forever.
It's not digesting.
Not digesting.
Terrible.
It's just sitting there forever.
Which means they're also not getting the nutrients they need out of the food they're eating.
Right. Exactly. Okay. And she was having, some reflux up to her esophagus, and it was hurting some. So the esophagus tube is not made for acid. The stomach is a acid pot. It makes hydrochloric acid. And so actually I started giving her hydrochloric acid. Well, her GI gastrointestinal doctor went ballistic. And
because it seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does,
especially to people, unfortunately, that are trained in a very narrow paradigm.
I've heard this from Dave Mason also. And he essentially says like that gastroreflux is because the pyloric valve at the top of the stomach, if it's not sensing acid, it's not closing.
Right. Matter of fact, the top part of the stomach is different than the rest, and I think they may call that the cardia. And actually, it requires acid to close.
Right. And so if your stomach stops making enough acid, it's not closing. The little bit that is being made refluxes up.
It hurts. It's going to hurt.
And over time, it causes the
erosion and potentially Barrett's, precancerous type issues.
And so the solution, which is completely counterintuitive.
For what we have been trained as counterintuitive
to what the actual solution is.
And so they'll give an acid blocker to shut down the acid,
which
to
is
treat the symptom, not get to the source of the problem.
So Keith, because I know so many listeners out there right now are struggling with these kinds of issues. We've got about 3 minutes left before our break. Talk to the people and tell them that may be struggling with these kind of issues. Some of these simple things they can do with inexpensive supplements like HCl. Give them kind of a little.
Before you go, first go find a good clinical or a nutritionist or a compounding pharmacy that has these kinds of capabilities.
We do have to be careful. So if there's some erosion in the esophagus, Barrett's, we don't want to add acid into that inappropriately. You have to learn how to do it. And we do want digestive food, but we don't want it coming up.
Okay.
And so we have to kind of work sometimes in steps through that.
Interesting.
All right.
But the solution can be counterintuitive, which is add more acid, which will resolve the closure at the top of the stomach, which could then resolve all of the erosion issues because you're not introducing poor acid content in the stomach up into the system.
Right. Matter of fact, after the break, I'm going to tell you how to really take care of acid reflux. Acid reflux attack.
Right. There you go. All right, let's go to break. I'm Adam Payne. I got Josh here. This is Keith Bishop. This has been Ultra Life Today.